So welcome everybody. All right, wake up. It's time
Yeah,
to start.
I'm up. I'm just.
All right, we're here. This is our fourth week of the Trump administration, and it feels like it's our fourth year. But things keep moving along, and we're going to talk today about the week's developments in immigration law. Tell you, you know, our thoughts, and also trying to answer some of your questions. If you are watching us on X, or you're watching us on LinkedIn, or you're watching us on YouTube, or you're watching us on Facebook, the way to ask us questions is very straightforward. All you need to do is post a comment on the platform where you're watching, or a reply, and we see it here, and we can hopefully answer questions that you have. So we have a few. This wasn't as well, I mean, there were some big things, I should say. We've gotten so used to like such, earth-shattering, monumental things that, when it's a little bit quieter than that, like we don't have 10 executive orders coming out in a day or something like that, we act like now that it's we've normalized the craziness of it all. But there were a few things that did happen this week, and I wanted to talk to you about a few of them. One I considered really serious. And Ari, this was this news that came out earlier today. It was reported by CBS that the U.S. is pausing immigration applications for people that came in under the various Biden parole programs. These were the Uniting for Ukraine program. This was the CHNV program for people that had pending I-130 applications that they paroled in to be able to wait it out in the United States. And it was also the people that were from countries that were, there were four other countries, I think it was Haiti was one, and a few others that allowed people to seek, instead of going to the border and asking for asylum, they could present those kind of claims and then get admitted in parole status and then seek asylum once they got here.
Yeah, and just says it was Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
Right. So what CBS is reporting today, and the great Camilo Montoya Galvez, who's their immigration reporter, broke this story, or at least I think he's the one that broke this. Apologize to any other journalist out there who might have reported it earlier, but that's the person we saw was his report. But what they are saying is that if you entered in one of these Biden programs, you cannot, well, they are effectively freezing your applications that you might have been filing to get out of those categories into other categories. And that includes, for example, applying for TPS, which Haiti, Ukraine, and Venezuela have. And those were countries where people were paroled in, and then some of them were eligible to apply for TPS. Asylum apparently is on that list. Now, again, I believe they're allowing people to file those applications, but they're not working on those applications.
No, well, so what they're reporting was that they are allowing the file. They're still able to, USCIS is still able to work on the applications, but they're not allowed to actually adjudicate any.
Okay. I wouldn't worry about asylum, because asylum is not, those cases are not being worked on right now anyway. In fact, for some people, I mean, in the past, occasionally they will speed up processing on an asylum application if they think somebody's filing it to basically get other benefits. So in some cases, it's actually kind of counterproductive for a government that's trying to crack down on bad asylum claims. And then also people that were seeking green cards and through family members, for example. That's kind of hard to believe that they're holding those cases up, because I'm not really sure why they wouldn't be. These were people that would have been eligible if they waited abroad. So anyway, that affects hundreds of thousands of people potentially. And I also think that that's one that, and we talked about this. We had our attorney lunch today, and so there were don't know, 9 or 10 of us that were around Zoom because we had a winter storm here in Memphis, so we couldn't have our usual in-person lunch. But when we were talking, we thought that this might be one that would be litigated, and I'm actually going to be talking with some of the impact litigation partners about this. But this is not good. That these are people who legally entered the United States. They haven't broken any laws. They came in on a government program that was out there. They came in parole status. They were not coming in crossing the border and then seeking asylum. These are people who came in, who applied outside the United States to enter the U.S. in one of these programs, and now they are saying that they're not going to allow them to switch to these other benefits that they are eligible for. I don't think a judge is going to like it. I think they have not presented any good explanation for it. I think what they're hoping to do is to knock people out of legal status and then make it easier to deport these people. And that's they can try for that, but I don't think they're going to succeed once litigation gets going on that particular issue. I was a little surprised by that.
And just to remind people that this has not been formally announced yet. This is being reported by CBS that they've seen an internal memo within the administration. This is what they're doing.
Yeah, so we will. So we'll keep you up to date on that. If you're in one of those programs, obviously that's that's something that is that's disturbing. There was also, this is sort of like an oldie for this administration. They're going back to something that they tried before, but the U.S. citizenship test is apparently something that the new administration wants to update. They tried to do this previously. I think already there was litigation the last time that blocked some of what they were trying to do. But in any case, it is they are claiming that the exam hasn't been updated since 2008. But that's not for lack of trying. I think they tried to do it the last time. One of the there's so many weird things with this administration. One of the weird things that they are trying to incorporate into this is they're going to show people pictures of things and ask them. An officer is going to show photos of ordinary scenarios, apparently, like daily activities, weather, or food, and ask the applicant to verbally describe the photos. So I'm not sure if that's the English or the social part of it on there, but I guess if they show a picture of a cheeseburger and French fries, and a person is like not acculturated enough to know what that is and be able to describe it in English, apparently they're not going to get U.S. citizenship. It's weird.
It's also gonna create a situation where it's a lot more subjective. I mean, unless there's a specific answer for that sort of thing, which I don't know how they do that. Currently, the everything they go through when they're testing the English is objective. It's can you give us the information? Can you answer the questions? When we ask you for your address, can you give us your address? When you're going through the civics exam, there's specific answers that you can give. It's not it's not an open question. If I show you a picture of burgers and fries and someone, well, it's food. It's something you eat. Is that wrong? No. Does that show that they can't because they don't say burgers and fries?
It just seems to me like
it's harder on the officers, and it's also going to leave a lot open to the officers to be able to make denials that are then going to be questionable.
Yeah, it's a new stress. They're introducing a new stress point in these applications. Right. Like people aren't stressed enough as they're trying to learn all these questions and be able to for a lot of people it's extremely nerve-wracking to take the citizenship exam, and this is just one more thing on top of that. So we will see what that looks like when it rolls out, but apparently that's on the agenda. Ari, I don't know if I showed you or if I told you about the story that I was going to mention tonight, but it was just one I find myself cursing at the computer when I see some of these stories coming, but this is one that was reported by the Chattanooga Times Free Press about our state. There's states seem to be trying, really tripping over themselves in our part of the world to try and be as cool as possible to people who are undocumented immigrants in the U.S. And the Tennessee legislature has introduced a bill that would create a new felony and misdemeanor offenses
Right.
for
I did hear about this.
that would target non-profit organizations that provide assistance to immigrants without legal status.
From what they say, it's kind of broad. So
I mean, I'm just thinking about
shelter that allows someone to be in their homeless shelter.
Catholic services and going after priests, and they're going after the Lutheran services that operate in our state. Or they, this is.
Well, and would this apply to the city? If the city has a homeless shelter and they allow someone who is out of status to use their homeless shelter, does that?
Tennessee,
the mayor committed a felony.
Our legislature also has passed, I think, in the House, legislation that would bar children who are lacking immigration status from attending public school. Now, anybody who sort of knows about the law knows that the Supreme Court in 1981 or 82 in the Plyler decision said that states could not do that. That this was that it was unconstitutional. That it was an equal protection arguments, and that children have a right to be schooled. Tennessee apparently wants to see if they can get the Supreme Court to reverse their the Plyler decision. That would be really, surprising if the Supreme Court is ready to go that far. But we, obviously after the abortion decision and some of the other decisions that we've seen, we know that the court is willing to overturn old precedents. But this is going to be one that I think is going to be really interesting to see what they do on that. They have, Tennessee also has, Missouri, next door in Mississippi, below us, have legislation that created bounties for people that turned in people that are here illegally, $1,000 that you get from the government if you turn somebody over on there, and that is, that's Nazi stuff on there. Let's call it what it is, of turning in your neighbors for a bounty from your government. So hopefully, Tennessee hasn't tried that yet, but the fact that it's happened in the two states next to us, Missouri and Mississippi, who haven't passed them yet. In Mississippi, to their credit, the legislature through that they didn't pass that out of committee, so it seems like it's dead in Mississippi for a while. But it seems like that's the new thing. So we will watch that, and hopefully this is not something that's going anywhere. Ari, I know a lot of people are really interested in this interview waiver news. Can you update us on that? That's particularly important for people that are on H-1B visas and student visas and other categories. So tell us what's happening with that change in policy that was just announced by the State Department.
Right. So the State Department has made a change in who is eligible for a waiver of the non-immigrant visa interview. So just to explain that there are certain people who are eligible to be able to either mail their documents in or drop them off at a Dropbox and be able to get their visa without an in-person interview at the consular post. And this has been extremely helpful because it's helped to cut down on the visa wait times, which became extremely long, especially after COVID and changes in the previous Trump administration caused a huge backlog in those. That really, in some places, it took forever for them to get through. So they've made some changes, but for the most part, the program is still there. But it's going to require that. So the exceptions for certain categories like A's, NATO, G3 are still there, and for diplomatic or official type visas. But the changes.
We don't have that many people probably in those categories.
Right. Well, I just explained those are still there. But for the other categories, so you now have to be in previously held the same visa category, okay, which was there for most categories a requirement as well. And you have to have either a valid visa or the visa had to have expired no more than 12 months prior. And that's a big change because under the previous requirement, it was 48 months. So that's, instead of having your visa expired in the last 4 years, it's now in the last year. So there's a lot of people that are, previously would have been eligible for this that are now not going to be eligible for it. And especially in certain countries, you have, with a much shorter visa issuance time. For example, China, they will have visas that are only issued for 1 year in certain categories. And so, it's going to be a lot harder, require a lot more planning in place for people if they want to be able to take advantage of these waivers. Also, other requirements that are there are you have to be applying in the country of nationality or residence, although that was previously there. And you have to have never been refused a visa. And you have to have no other ineligibilities. So you can't need any other waivers in order to get this. So, and again, this is, on a case-by-case basis. So we'll have to see how, if there's any change in who they're actually, how many of these they're actually giving out. But the big change, of course, is that 4 years expiration date, to the 1 year, which cuts out a lot of people and is going to require a lot more planning on people's parts. And because there's a lot less people that are eligible for this waiver, it means we're going to see a backlog.
Well, let me put some additional context because there have been some other developments relating to consular processing that kind of make this a perfect storm for a collapse in consular processing. One is what we know is happening, which would have happened at the beginning of the first Trump administration, which is people are leaving government and consular officers are quitting, and that's already creating some pressures on processing times. We believe that they were eligible for the bonuses that were being offered to employees that were quitting federal agencies. I believe, I'm not 100% positive on that, but I believe that was the case. And basically the rule is that they're only supposed to hire back one person for every 4 people that are leaving. So there's not a plan in place to replace these people as they're leaving. So that's problem number one, is that personnel is declining in terms of consular officers. Problem number two is, we mentioned this last week, that there's an order apparently at a number of consulates for them to fire 10 to 20% of their local staff. And local staff perform a lot of important functions that keep consulates moving their cases along. A lot of things. I mean, everything from the cashier that's accepting the checks for an application to the people that are, there are a lot of, even the background checks and things like that are happening. A lot of that's being done by local staff. So that's that's potentially also seriously going to delay. And then this new policy, which is of course going to create a whole bunch of new work for consulates at the same time as they're losing staff. I don't see anything good coming as far as the amount of time it's going to take for processing. Tech wise, they were already much farther along than USCIS in terms of the tech that they had available. So I don't think that they can automate their way around delays at this point, and I think people need to look at that now. The issue is that if you have to potentially travel, at times that are not good times, if you want to be able to avoid the interview. Ari, I guess that if you are being interviewed, um, in a lot of cases, how much of a delay is it going to cost to get that interview in these cases?
Well, I mean, we have no idea. I mean,
Depends on the consulate, obviously, but
depends on the consulate. But I mean, we could see delays of being able to get visa interviews. Some places previously it got as bad as some categories where it was a year. They were just and a lot of that was political more than actually practical, because it was certain visa categories were very much more backlogged than others. But yeah, I mean it's going to be an unknown, but it's going to require, again, it's a lot of planning on people.
Well, I think the advice that we give people is have a good conversation with your immigration lawyer before you're planning on traveling, because I think for a lot of people that are just assuming it's going to be a quick in and out. That's no longer going to be the case for a lot of people, and you need to think about what especially if you have families and not the whole family isn't traveling, and you could potentially be separated. We saw that happen during the COVID travel, the COVID travel bans and other travel bans where people were outside the country, family members were in the country. You just need to be really cautious before traveling outside the United States during this administration, unless you are perfectly prepared to wait it out for potentially extraordinary lengths of time.
And to make matters worse, USCIS, they got rid of, previously, till recently, they had on the website, they would list the processing time, the visa wait times for each consular post. So you could be able to look at it and see, okay, right now, they're showing that it's taking, a week to get an interview under this visa category at this consular post. That is gone. Now there's a global wait period time, which, again, what does that mean? Whatever the wait time is, it's still going to be a completely different wait time for someone who's in, Canada versus someone who's in India. And there's no way to know, it's going to be completely unreliable. And my understanding is that they haven't been updating it as regularly as they previously were. So that's going to lead to a period where it's going to even make it harder to plan, because we can't even look and see and get a good idea of what we can expect the wait time to be.
All right, let's in the parade of bad news. Let's talk about we've had legislation that has been introduced in both houses of Congress, trying to use the Congressional Review Act to overturn at least one DHS rule, and I'm not sure if there's more than one of these bills that are proposed, but in this case, the automatic extension period for employment authorization documents. This was the rule that extends timely filed employment authorization renewals by up to 540 days. That rule went into effect, I believe, in January, and there's an attempt by some in Congress to try and overturn that rule. So if you're not familiar with the Congressional Review Act, basically it allows, if both houses of Congress, by a simple majority, but if both houses of Congress pass a bill to overturn a regulation, and the president signs it, then the regulation can be overturned that way on there. Now, it's rare, and I Trump only succeeded, I think, in getting one non-immigration related thing overturned in his first administration. It's also very, very close in the House. So basically, if the Democrats decide, and I have a feeling the Democrats would be pretty uniform on opposing this bill, the Republicans would have to get their entire their entire caucus to vote in favor of this bill. They could lose, I think, 3 votes. And so there's now an advocacy campaign to try and get people to reach out to members of Congress and tell them to oppose this legislation. And we just got information on that today. So hopefully that's something that won't get that much support. But they at least, I mean, these resolutions. We'll keep an eye on that. There were some other regulations that were pretty significant that were passed at the or went final at the end of the Biden administration, and that includes the H-1B legislation, which had a lot of great things in there. That was a lot more immigrant friendly than certainly I think anything we're going to see in the current administration. So that was news this week that there was an advocacy campaign that started to try and oppose that bill. And then the last thing was something that popped up in my news feed during our lunch today, and that is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The chair, this woman, Andrea Lucas, announced that EEOC is putting employers on notice. If you are part of the pipeline, right now I'm reading a quote from them. If you are part of the pipeline contributing to our immigration crisis or abusing our legal immigration system via illegal preferences against American workers, you must stop. The law applies to you and you are not above the law. EEOC is here to protect all workers from unlawful national origin discrimination, including American workers. Now, the reason why I brought this up is that it sort of harkens, I think I might have even said it as recently as last week that we had really not seen that much of an attack on legal immigration yet. And that most of what we were seeing, and this one probably had something to do with Elon, was happening on the illegal immigration side. But slowly things are creeping in that are affecting legal immigration, like the interview waiver thing that Ari just mentioned. And this is another one where they had I think it's sort of putting us on notice that the kinds of actions that were taken against Facebook and taken against Apple in the way that they handled recruiting for their perm applications was an example of that. There had been they've gone back in the I think H-1B staffing companies have been regularly berated by a number of people in the administration on this particular theme of discriminating against U.S. workers. And we'll see what kinds of actions that EEOC decides to pursue. But I wanted to mention that just because I think that that's going to be something that's going to be a running theme. And if we're going to see attacks on legal immigration, it's probably going to be through those kinds of measures. And that would be consistent with the kind of stuff that we saw in the first Trump administration that we thought maybe we would see less of with the Silicon Valley billionaires making it clear that they were not going along with the Stephen Miller agenda. So, all right, that was the last thing I had on the list of news developments. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to mention, or you wanted to get to a few questions. We don't have that many questions.
No.
If you want to ask a question, certainly go ahead and put it in the comments. We'll go ahead and address it. We did get one question from Orlando, who said that he wanted to know about N400 denial rates. N400s are the naturalization applications. Has there been a slowdown in processing already?
I haven't seen.
Yeah, so we haven't seen any data
No.
yet on this particular issue to show that we're seeing, and it probably wouldn't be reflected. We're not going to see data probably. There's usually a lag period of several months after that we see. So my guess is we'll
And
probably
I'm not hearing any
see.
buzz yet about a noticeable difference. And I'm not seeing it with my case, a noticeable difference. I mean, the as is the cases are kind of all over the place, anyways. You know, some it has to do with mostly different USCIS offices have completely different processing times.
Yeah, I don't. The second part of the question about, well, the part about USCIS staff being laid off, I don't think we've heard about any layoffs happening at
No.
USCIS. We've heard about voluntary, the people voluntarily leaving and claiming the bonus.
But we've last we heard that is not for USCIS.
Right. They apparently internally they said that you could pursue that, and then they changed their position on that. So that hasn't happened. So as far as we know, USCIS hasn't seen any kind of hemorrhaging yet of staff. I don't know whether they've lost people just unhappy with the environment. So I don't know. We don't have a USCIS director yet either. We just have an interim who hasn't said anything publicly on that either. And by the way, I think she's been the interim before. We don't know that much about her, but she's been at the agency a long time. I think I've heard that Kathy Navarek, I think that's Kathy Newell Navarek, was the person that's in line for that position. But that I'm not sure if that's just a rumor or that's true. I've met her a few times over the years. She started on the congressional staff and then has been working in the immigration side for a while. And so she certainly has experience in the space, and we'll see how she is. But if in fact she's the one that's coming. But I haven't heard anything about staff being laid off. And if anybody does, have any interesting news or tips or anything like that, you're welcome to send it to me. I'll tell you what I think on there, so you can let me know. Yeah, the attack on legal immigration was the ending of the refugee program. That is true. I guess what I kind of put the parole programs into their own classification. And by the way, the ending of the parole programs was just you're totally right that I was trying to say that the focus had been largely on illegal immigration, but you're absolutely correct. The president put a moratorium on refugee processing. There was a lawsuit that was filed by a number of organizations together, and they have apparently blocked at least some aspects of the executive orders that were intended to try and deconstruct the infrastructure that's around the refugee program. So I was happy to see that. It was a very interesting mix of organizations, a lot of non-governmental organizations in the faith-based communities that process, but there was also, I think that same suit, the American Bar Association was a litigant in it as well. So that was, there was some good news this week in the courts that was worth noting, and that was one of the issues where we saw that. But you're right. And as far as strategies, I still think for people from Ukraine, people from the other 8 countries that had the parole status, there are still options that are available, and they seem like they are they're not canceling or revoking parole from people in the middle of the parole that have parole at this point already. Although I can see that coming. My understanding, Ari, is that the parole programs have been suspended as far as new entries with these parole applications, but they are not. They're not at this point trying to revoke parole status like they are with the TPS program for Venezuela, which they're trying to take to take people out of that status earlier than they would have been the case. So Aaron at a Hills, our friend from Memphis, asked if there was anything on the way about work authorization in EADs for F1 students. We don't, there's talk, and you can, if you want to sort of see a preview of things that they're thinking about, read the Project 2025 section on immigration, where they do talk about that. There hasn't been any new proposals yet on this particular issue. We know that they've had on the anti-immigrants in the White House have had their eyes on the STEM OPT for a while, but litigation attempts in the past haven't gone anywhere on that. So it's going to be, I think they might be picking and choosing which battles they undertake. And I think they also are undertaking some of them, assuming that they're going to lose and then hoping that they might get a lucky break on there. So we haven't seen anything yet specifically on EADs for students, but that's not to say that that we're not going to see, and I think we're going to see attacks on F1 students generally speaking, and that's you can expect that to be coming. But for now, I don't have any news to report on that. Ari, you have anything in that you've heard?
No, nothing recent. No.
Okay. So we had an additional question by Ukrainians in the USA about EAD wait times for CHE.
CHE, Cuban Haitian entrance.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think it is. CHE.
CHE.
What stands for? I'm assuming that's what it is. If you mean it for something else, let us know. But that's what CHE means to me. I don't know. Yes. Yeah. Okay, that is correct. He says. I mean. I'm not aware of
all we have is anecdotal evidence because they're not they don't break it down in a lot of cases for processing times that we see by categories that in that that specific a way. They might say EADs for parolees broadly, but I don't think that they break it down for each of the programs as far as how long the processing times are. And when we see that, it's usually a lagging time frame. It's not usually what's happening in the moment. So I don't have, if USCIS times aren't accurate, it's probably because they just haven't updated it in a while, and you're probably seeing sort of the reality right now that's not being reflected in the data. And that's not a new problem. That's been a problem for a long time. I'm actually working on a project right now, a data analytics AI project that would be a way there's a technique that we want to employ to give us much more of a real-time look at what different types of cases are taking. But we don't have that. We're just experimenting with that right now. Yeah, and you're saying 5 to 12 months, which is unbearable.
But that's what it's been for most EADs as well. So I don't know that that's not specific to CHE.
Right. By the way, there used to be a regulation, and I don't write comments to every regulation that comes down the pike, but I did write a comment on this one a few years. This was at the tail end of the Obama administration. This came out of them, where there used to be a 90-day requirement that the government had to adjudicate a employment authorization document in 90 days, and they lobbied to get rid of that and claimed that there were security needs that they, to do the background checking, they had to take more than 90 days. That was baloney because they already had the ability to delay past 90 days if there was a security issue that was the cause for the delay. But nevertheless, that survived and is the rule right now. So they don't really have much. There's not really much you can do about it. You can try and litigate and ask for a court to grant you a mandamus claim for it, but that's not That's not something that most people want to do. So all we can do is really nag our congressman and and go to court when we can and try and keep the government honest in that regard.
Yeah, make sure you call your congressman and let them know your complaints about this, because that's really how it will change.
Yeah, so travel bans affecting effects on I-751s and what to. So the question.
Just before we do this 751, were you about to explain that? I'll explain.
Well, you explained the 751, but I wanted to say something broadly about travel bans.
Yeah, so the I-751 is an application for people who, if they get their green card through marriage, and that marriage happened at the time they get the green card, they've been married less than 2 years. They get a conditional green card that's good for 2 years, and they have to apply to have that condition removed. So that's the application we're talking about. And right now, it's gotten to where the 751 applications have been taking so long that they started expanding the time frame that the notice that you get with it extends the validity of your current green card. So now they're up to 4 years. When you get the notice, it shows a 4-year extension of your green card. And just to explain that's just, the ability to use the green card and show if someone's green card expires, that doesn't mean that they lose their status if they're in the U.S. And not necessarily if they're outside the U.S. either, but it's just their document has an expiration date. And so that's what that is. I mean, you can talk about generally, and then I want to talk about the 751, in my opinion, on that.
Yeah. So one I wanted to say about travel bans, we haven't seen travel bans yet, but we're going to. And we know we're going to because the president said in one of his executive orders he wanted a list of recommendations on travel bans on his desk by, I think, April. So it's not to say he couldn't do it sooner than that, but we are expecting. We've heard that there might be several additional countries that are added to the travel bans. So I would be concerned especially if you're from a country that is, previously had a travel ban, and not talking about the COVID travel bans, but previously had a travel ban that was related to something that was security related. And that is that's another reason why the advice that I'm giving to clients generally is there are lots of nice places in the United States to go on vacation. Go somewhere in the United States and don't travel abroad unless you need to. On there, I understand that people want to go and see family, and they have other reasons why they want to travel abroad, or they need to go for work, or there's a lot of reasons why people need to go abroad. But if it's completely discretionary, right now it just seems like there's so many things that can go wrong from an immigration perspective that you just need to be prepared for it. And when it happens to you, you've been warned. But that's something that I would be careful about. I don't think a travel ban is that much of a risk if you're from, a country that, for example, is a visa waiver country. Those are pretty unlikely. And as far as the travel bans go, normally the way they work is they will apply across the board, except to people who have green cards.
Right.
And
so
then,
I'm going to say that, yeah.
Then they'll have different kinds of waivers and exceptions for that, but it seems like they vary depending on the travel ban. So
the previous travel bans did not apply to permanent residents, so to green card holders. So right. Someone who has a 751 pending, you're a green card holder, even though it's a conditional, the card's conditional, but you are a permanent resident. And so there should not be, there's no expectation that any travel ban that happens is going to affect someone who has a permanent resident who has a 751 pending and the proper documentation.
I mean, I don't think it's 750. Well, 751, you're a permanent resident, so you're right. You're probably
you're permanent. You're conditional residents, but the card's conditional.
Be more concerned about somebody who had an I-45 pending. And
Right. No. That's different. If you, I mean, having a I-45 pending. Again, and let me just say also that there was, certain paroles, have become the government has gone after certain paroles. The paroles for someone who has a pending 485, they have clarified that the advanced parole is not one of those paroles that is an issue, and CBP has even sent notice to the airlines saying, hey, allow people who have a valid advance parole to get on the airplanes, because that's not the parole we were talking about. Right. But yeah, if there's a travel ban, especially if we see certain per country travel bans, then that could affect people even with advanced parole. So yeah, that's something to be careful about, but it won't necessarily affect them. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But again, yeah, I want to be very clear. If you're a green card holder, even if it's a conditional green card, as long as you have a timely filed 751, if you have a conditional green card, I don't have any expectation that that's going to affect your ability to travel.
They're still
go ahead and travel, enjoy your vacation.
They're still
make sure you have the right documentation with you when you travel.
Right. No, and I was being a little facetious before about vacationing in the United States. I think that
no, it's good. That's good advice for a lot of people.
But I think in this case, you're still a permanent resident, even if your green card expires and you have a pending 751.
Right. Then your green card has not expired.
Right. Well, let's just say the 751 is pending for a long time and the actual document is expired.
Right. So let's say if it's pending more than 4 years, which is what the current one is, you can still go and get a stamp that will allow you can get it as good for a year, that you can get a stamp at the USCIS office that will extend further that time frame and allow you to travel. So
yeah, that's a good idea to have that. All right, we have
and for those, if you have it, and let's say that documentation expires while you're abroad, for example, as long as you can't be outside the U.S. for a year continuously as a permanent resident, but if that's happening, then you would go and get a what's called a travel letter. There's a bunch of different names for it, but that's issued by the consular post that would basically say this person has valid status to travel. It allows you to get the airline to let you onto the plane.
All right, let's move on to another question. This is kind of like an interesting question, because it's sort of something that we see come up a lot, which is just when somebody makes a stupid error in data entry. In this case, we have somebody who has an approval for an H extension, and the I-129 had, well, actually, I guess this was the fault of the petitioner, but they put an old passport number on there, but have the correct passport included, which USCIS is probably not checking that. They're just looking at whatever number was put in the form. Will this cause issues when applying for a visa stamp abroad? The I-797 doesn't have any passport number anywhere in the form. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
I'm going to say it's hard to predict sometimes what a specific consular officer will do. It shouldn't cause an issue because, again, a lot of times you have a new passport by the time you're applying for your visa.
Right.
So the fact that you're applying for a visa with a different passport than the one you used to apply, when you applied for your petition approval, that happens all the time.
This would be what I would consider an immaterial error, where it's I think I would probably have a lawyer or your employer just, have a little letter that says, we're sorry, we transposed the information from the earlier application, even though this individual gave us the correct documents, and we made the mistake of putting that in there, that information in there. Please don't Please don't punish this innocent person for our mistake. I mean, that's sometimes that falling on the sword letter from an employer is helpful to pull out if that seems like you're getting questions on this issue. I don't think you will.
But let me also say that, you know, these things are very case specific. So you talk to your lawyer about it, and you know, follow the advice of your immigration lawyer, because you know, again, we don't know all the specifics of the case, so it's hard for us to say exactly what.
Always disclaimer.
I just want to be clear on that one.
We're not your lawyers.
We're not your lawyers. You can't rely on our advice, but that's one way to look at it. I would be surprised if this was an issue. Although, again, it's impossible to predict everything that consular officers will do when there's an issue. But again, I will say that all the time people apply for visas with a different passport than the one that they had at the time they apply for the petition.
So that's not
why I don't think this is going to be an issue.
Yeah. All right. So we got a little bit more information on that 751 question, and then we'll wrap it up after that on here. So this was interesting that USCIS refused the stamp.
Well, it's not. I mean, okay, if you're asking for the stamp during that 48-month period, then they're correct. You don't need the stamp, because all you need is your expired green card, your passport, and the receipt notice, the 797 receipt notice from the 751, which says on it that it extends your green card for an additional 48 months after the expiration date. So if you're applying for that stamp within that 48 months from the expiration date of your green card, they're correct. They don't need to give you a stamp because you don't need it. Now, if it's beyond the 48 months, yeah, they should not be refusing you a stamp, because, again, you're a permanent resident and you have the, you know, I believe you have a right to the stamp. But yeah, if you're applying during those 48 months, you're wasting, you know, not to be rude about it, you're wasting everybody's time, including your own time, because you don't need it.
All right. Well, so that's good news. That he should be fine to travel and should be in good shape. All right, we are going to end with that, and I want to thank people for tuning in each week. We like doing these, and we will be back here next Wednesday. And I don't know what the combination of people is. I'm trying to make it every week if I can on these. I'm going to be abroad for the week following, so somebody else for sure is going to be there. But save your questions up if you have them, and tune in next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we will be back. So
tell your friends about us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.